Welcome to Crime Survivors Speak. My name is Aswad Thomas. I'm the National Director of Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice. We are a national network of over 200,000 victims of crime from across the country. If you haven't already subscribed to stay up to date on the latest episodes, you can do that on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other streaming services by clicking the link on your screen or going to the website at www.cssj.org/podcasts. Another amazing guest for you all here today. I'm talking with someone from my hometown. Our guest today is Elle Travis. Elle is a survivor, advocate, and a community leader based in Michigan. Elle, after overcoming personal trauma and system involvement, Elle now dedicates her life to supporting others through healing, access to services, things like victim compensation, reentry, and also survivor-centered justice. She is a passionate voice for change, working to break cycles of harm and build safer, more compassionate communities in her hometown of Detroit. Elle is also the founder of Hands on Healing Detroit. And guess what, y'all? I know you all are not surprised. Elle also served as the CSSJ Detroit chapter coordinator. Elle, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Aswad. Thank you for having me.
It's awesome to have you on today, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to speak with us. So, Elle, before we get into your story, your advocacy work, your organization, can you tell us a little bit about what brings you joy these days, or something in your daily life that helps you stay grounded?
These days, I'm a grandma. My grandson will be 4 months tomorrow, and he is the bee's knees as well. I'm like, parenthood brings you a certain level of joy. I thought that was it until I saw him, and that's just joy every day. Like, I'm smiling right now just thinking about him. Outside of that, daily grounding, I do meditation, I do yoga, and since I've been practicing yoga, I guess I'm a yogi, if you will. I notice a big difference in mood every day, being able to handle our daily volatility. Those things really help.
That's awesome. Congratulations on becoming a grandmother, and also, as you mentioned, those self-care practices. I'm looking forward to you one day facilitating one of our Wellness Wednesdays activities and taking survivors through meditation or yoga. I want to transition to hearing a little bit more about your story. Unfortunately, like far too many survivors of sexual assault, you experienced the dual traumas of sexual violence, followed by the justice system's failure to provide you with the safety and accountability you deserve. Can you tell us more about your story and how that happened?
Sure. Well, I'm a survivor of sexual assault. When I filed my report and had my sexual assault evidence kit or a rape kit done, the Detroit police failed to take my kit to the testing facility to start the investigation process as per protocol. My kit was taken to a warehouse and just sat there with many other rape kits. I'm a survivor of what's known as the National Rape Kit Backlog. Here in Detroit is the Detroit Rape Kit Backlog, where I'm part of a class of 11,341 other survivors discarded by law enforcement. I'm part of a class of almost 500,000 men and women across the country. So the end result is our communities pay for it because we're overrun with predators.
Wow, and thank you for sharing. I wanted to back up to make sure that our audience heard you. So you are a survivor of sexual assault. When you went to get your rape kit done, that kit wasn't taken to an actual facility. It was taken to a warehouse. I think this happened in 2009, where over 11,341 rape kits were not tested in Detroit. And then across the country, there are over 500,000 men and women who's part of this horrible rape kit backlog. Since then, I think the state of Michigan has tried to test most of the rape kits. Through that testing, there's been efforts to prosecute some of the offenders implicated by the DNA evidence because of the testing, which has also resulted in convictions and justice for many survivors, but not you.
Yes.
I believe from our conversations, the man who sexually assaulted you was acquitted in 2017, despite being implicated as a serial offender. Can you tell us more about what that process was like for you and also the many survivors who was part of that horrible experience of not having their rape kit tested?
My serial rapist is currently free. He was found not guilty despite having multiple rape kits sharing his DNA. There are many loopholes, including the statute of limitations here in Michigan regarding sexual assault at that time. Because of that loophole, many kits didn't even get tested, or, some survivors never even got to go through the legal process that I went through. But going through the legal process as a sexual assault survivor and connected to the rape kit backlog, I was basically blamed for not only my sexual assault, but why it took so long to get to court, because the court proceedings didn't start until 10 years after my actual sexual assault by this man. And I would also add, I'm a multiple sexual assault survivor. My last 2 sexual assaults were the ones I reported to the police. So those 2 instances had me with 2 separate rape kits in the Detroit backlog. Both of my rapists are free. This situation genetically identified almost 1,000 serial rapists with DNA connections to 39 other states outside of Detroit, I should say. Only about 1% of that population is actually incarcerated now after the court proceedings. So the numbers stand around almost 300. When I came out of court in 2017, there were only 62 rapists incarcerated. I knew that majority would end up on the street still with us. So that was actually my catalyst and why I started speaking out and became who I am today. 8 years ago, a couple of days ago, was the day that my verdict came in, which said not guilty on 3 counts, which allowed him to be free. And tomorrow will be 8 years since my serial rapist was released. I'm just grateful that I've been able to fight and make major changes that will help people to not have my experience.
Wow. Just your commitment to being a voice for so many survivors, not just in Detroit, not just in Michigan, but across the country. And I believe also, as you mentioned, this is not just a Detroit issue. I remember a few years ago, Cleveland as well, and a lot of major cities experience this backlog, right? Especially victims, especially who are African American or Black survivors, are often denied even the recognition of being a survivor, often denied access to support and protection that they deserve, especially Black women who are often hypersexualized and disbelieved when they experience sexual violence. That bias shows up everywhere, even in institutions meant to protect us. So, Elle, can you share how that dynamic showed up in your own experience and how it shaped the way you were treated as a survivor?
Everything you said, that's exactly what opened the door for the National Rape Kit Backlog to happen. First and foremost, sexual assault, intimate partner violence, or domestic violence, especially in our communities, aren't taken very seriously because of these biases and mentalities. When we do report, we're often blamed or treated as the criminal versus the victim, which was my case personally. I was treated like I essentially assaulted myself, or a lot of us were treated like we were prostitutes, or told directly by law enforcement that we were prostitutes, homeless, or crazy, just a major dismissal of us as a whole and our testimony of what happened to us due to the criminalization, but the hypersexualization on the other end. Black women can't be victims, and that does go through all of the system. I remember even before my notification phone call, I was doing my own follow-up regarding my sexual assaults, like you share with your situation. When we come out of the hospital after having our sexual assault evidence kits done and these interviews and things, there is still a crime scene when it comes to sexual assault. Our bodies are the crime scene. So we have to deal with multiple levels of intrusion and violation, and this is after the sexual assault has already occurred, because we don't want what happened to us to happen to anybody else. And that's why we take the steps of reporting and go through these extra intrusions to help somebody else not end up where we currently are. But when you're dismissed, that doesn't happen. And then you watch in real time the same situation you endured continue to happen in your community. That's why I do a lot of work in harm reduction and trauma-informed interactions with the community, because these things play a factor in why we don't get properly serviced in these areas. To reduce harm, I speak with law enforcement, hospital-based systems. I believe in trauma-informed, person-centered, survivor-centered interactions in all of these spaces. Anywhere where there's a connection or involvement with the survivor, it should be trauma-informed, and you should be trying to have as least harmful interaction with this person as possible, because they're already distraught. Why would you want to make that worse?
Out of your direct experience, you're now starting to fill the gap in supporting other survivors, even providing training to law enforcement and other victim services. Most recently, you founded your own organization called Hands on Healing Detroit. Can you tell us a little bit about what made you develop that organization? Also, you talk about what are some of the services that you provide to survivors?
Hands on Healing was born out of me already being in the community, doing the work, providing services. I provide services in the community for survivors of all crime, given the area I'm in, being on the east side of Detroit. Gun violence, intimate partner violence, of course, sexual assault. I mainly provide leads and referrals to support services, wraparound services, such as food, clothing, workforce development, training, or things like that, so they can start reapplying for jobs. Any service in the community that helps survivors regain their footing, and help them back on the path to self-sufficiency and wholeness, I provide those by way of leads and referrals. I also do case management for certain clients to help them or support them as they rebuild, kind of hold them accountable as they take the steps to rebuild in the aftermath of crime and trauma. I currently have about 5 program participants that I do work with case management. I'm also CP certified, so that's the Address Confidentiality Program. I'm certified through the Michigan Attorney General, and that is an extra safety mechanism for those who want to conceal their address from the public. This program actually would have helped me tremendously if it had been available while I was going through my court process and in the aftermath with my serial rapist being free. Once you go through a court case, all of your information becomes public. So I still deal with harassment and things like that from my rapist and his family. So this program, the ACP program, will actually help survivors not have to experience harassment and have full safety and protection at home.
Wow, that's incredible. So you founded this organization providing leads and referrals, basic needs like food, clothing, wraparound services, helping people access jobs, through workforce development, helping survivors on their path to recovery, and also providing case management. Also, helping survivors get support from the ACP program. I'm curious, with this work that you're doing in your organization, are you supported by the state of Michigan, whether it's state or local funding? How are you doing such tremendous work?
I'm actually unfunded. I don't receive any support from
Wow.
the state. I do accept in-kind donations, which help a lot, especially in crisis situations where I might have to pay for a hotel room for the night for a IPV survivor escaping a domestic situation, or a sexual assault survivor who doesn't feel safe returning home. A lot of people think that sexual assaults happen out in public and a stranger did it and it's in a public space and things. Most sexual assaults happen either in the person's home or in a very close proximity to a person's home. So once you lose that sense of safety where you're supposed to find your peace, it's hard for a lot of people to return there. I do also provide crisis intervention services, like I said, such as emergency hotel rooms, so in-kind donations, but outside of that, I'm out of my own pocket.
So if you are listening, if you are out there in Michigan, please reach out to support this amazing organization called Hands on Healing Detroit. Please reach out to Elle, and Elle will share her contact information before we wrap up today's episode. Elle, just incredible work that you are doing to providing direct services, but also knowing you the past few years, you are one of the leading survivor advocates in the state of Michigan and across the country. So I want to talk a little bit about your leadership in this work and your advocacy as well. You've taken your lived experience and turned it into leadership in advocacy. Can you talk about how you got involved in advocacy and what motivated you to speak out and support others?
I just did it. I came out of court. I was actually still crying and shook up from the verdict. But my first thought was, what if this was to happen to my daughter? At the time, my daughter was 15 years old. She had only been 15 for roughly about a month. And I had her at 15, so it was a whole full circle type moment. And I just really was like, what would I do? Once I realized, of course, I can't protect her from experiencing things. So I'm like, I can't protect her. But if something like this were to ever happen to her, I can make sure that what she's going to need exists. Because when I came out of court, it didn't exist. Trauma recovery centers, even the status of the Crime Victims Compensation Act here in Michigan, there were a lot of things in complete disarray, causing bigger gaps of care for survivors like myself. So once I came with that realization, it was like the least I could do is speak out. And I started speaking out to bring awareness in the community that, hey, we have predators here. Hide your kids, protect them the best you can, protect yourselves. But also, like I said, those who have already been impacted, we need support services to help us rebuild our lives, to help us if we need to relocate or whatever we may need to heal from this situation. And that's what started my advocacy as a survivor rights advocate and activist, also a community-based activist advocate. It even led to policy work, so I'm also a policy advocate. Any way that my story and my experience can be utilized to help make sure that things like this don't continue to happen, that's basically what I do, especially when it comes to harm reduction, backlog reform, prison reentry, and reform, because all of those areas also impact survivors, every area needs to be done in the best way possible so it has a more positive impact on our communities and on survivors themselves. And that's all I do. That's my focus.
I want to follow up on something that you just said. Many people, when they hear that survivors and victims are also advocating for criminal justice reform and rehabilitation, many people are surprised about that. Your work often centers on creating space for those who've been incarcerated to find healing and community after release. Why is that part of the survivor movement of helping those who have came in contact with the justice system? Why is that so important for you in the work that you do?
It's important for a number of reasons. The main reason is most perpetrators of crime are also victims themselves. Once a person is victimized, if they don't get the proper services, counseling, other support services that they need directly after that instance happens, pathways to healing, be it self-medication or, walling it up or retaliation, all of these lead to now that same person that was a victim is now also a criminal because they perpetrated a crime. Mm-hmm. In the aftermath of their own victimization. Once I realized personally, even with things like sexual assault, domestic violence, all of these things, most of our perpetrators, they were also sexually assaulted. They were also more than likely a secondhand survivor of domestic violence. Once you realize that the perpetrators of crime are also victims themselves, and then they were victimized also by the system because they don't get the help and support that they need once they're incarcerated. If they get the help and support that they need when they come back into our communities, it's better for everybody because they're less likely to continue down that path of crime because now they have skills. They could go to work and support their families, which is also another way how victims end up becoming criminals, even if it's selling drugs or robbery. After you're victimized by a crime, you can't work, you can't support your family, and you don't have these support services or access to them. That creates a desperation because now you're in poverty, which poverty also is a form of trauma, which leads to crime and down that, crime and victimization cycle. So in an effort to break the cycle, we all need resources, whether you're on the one end as a returning citizen or if you're still in the community as a survivor. If we all have the resources that we need, it'll be less likely for victims to end up becoming perpetrators of crime, and it'll be less likely for returning citizens when they return into our communities for them to keep up the perpetuation of this cycle of crime and victimization.
Elle, you just gave us a crime policy workshop on the failures of the justice system. And you talked about one of the foundational problems with the way crime policy has been built in this country is that it has never been designed to protect all people from harm. Most people who come in contact with the justice system often have been victims themselves far before they even came in contact with the justice system. And the solutions to stop this cycle of violence, the solution to stop over-incarceration is by simply helping people heal and recover, which prevents crime from happening, being able to make sure people got housing, jobs, things that promote economic stability are like the simple solutions to help us stop crime and violence in all communities, the simple solutions that's needed to prevent incarceration and also to prevent crime as well. I have two more questions for you. Thinking about the survivors who you've been able to connect with from the rape kit backlog. In April, you hosted your second event as part of the Voices from the Backlog event series to celebrate and honor those survivors affected by the rape kit backlog. Can you tell us a little bit about that event and why was it important for you to have that event again for the second time?
Thank you for bringing that up. The event was amazing. I don't know if you saw any of the press coverage, but it was phenomenal. There were several survivors. There were storytelling sessions. We did a healing visual. I also unveiled 11,341 seashells, which is the Detroit rape kit backlog here. I started collecting those seashells after the first Voices from the Backlog in April 2019 to finally show that publicly was an amazing feeling in itself. I also had keepsake gifts for survivors. So the purpose of the event was just to honor and celebrate survivors of sexual assault and survivors of the Detroit rape kit backlog, because we haven't been acknowledged. We haven't been seen, heard. There has been no accountability, truly. Everyone has their own level of impact. By the grace of God, I was able to come through it with enough strength to do everything that I've done in this 8 years. But some people are addicted to heavy drugs and narcotics. A lot of people have overdosed. The suicide rate in our little niche community is extremely high. The incarceration rate in our same little niche community is actually higher than the conviction rate for that of our serial rapists. There are about 3% of survivors connected to the rape kit backlog that are incarcerated, where there's really only about roughly 1.5% of our rapists and serial rapists incarcerated. So the importance of this event for me is I know several survivors of the backlog that are no longer here, they're deceased. I felt to do this event to honor us, to empower us, to connect us with other resources that now exist in the community that can help further our healing journey in the effort to save lives. So less of us feel that alone to where it's like, I don't want to be here no more. I'm also a suicide survivor myself. My last suicide attempt was January of 2020. So I know that struggle personally, and I felt this event, although most people might say it was small or insignificant, it helped save a life. It helped show a survivor that they're not alone and that somebody cares about them enough to not only fight and advocate for them, but to give them this little moment. I had a comedian there because laughter is medicine, and in my opinion, it's the best medicine. So why not have this event? We can set, this heavy thing down for 3 hours and just love on each other, enjoy each other, laugh, and eat some good food.
Yes, amazing media coverage. And also I just appreciate partnering with you in this work, not just on the legislative work, but building community with survivors. And also it was an honor for Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice to help sponsor and partner on that event. I know it's going to be an annual event. CSJ will continue to help support that event as well. So Elle, thank you so much for all the incredible work that you are doing. My last question, for those that are listening to this episode, for those who know your story, know your work, for those who don't know you, what message do you most want other survivors, especially those who might feel overlooked or unheard, to take from your story?
You're not alone. Even at your loneliest, you're not alone. We've all been there. Stay grounded, stay prayerful, and keep that fight within yourself. That fire is gonna get you through the darkest moments that come with healing and recovery. A lot of people don't want to talk about healing, and recovery is dark, it's ugly, it's scary, but it's worth it. So never let anybody discount or not validate your healing and your story. You matter and your healing matters.
Thank you so much, Elle. Wise words from someone that have taken her pain and made it her purpose, not only for herself, her family, but for so many survivors and communities across the state of Michigan and across the country. Elle, there may be people who are listening to this episode and want to support your work. We hope there are foundations and organizations that can help support your work through funding and also donations. How can people connect with you and support your work in Detroit?
They can connect with me through email. My email is iml@handsonhealingdetroit.org, or through Facebook. My Facebook information is Travis IML. Healing with Purpose is my healing community that I constructed on Facebook. They'll see a picture, and those are ways that they can connect with me. Also via telephone, my organizational phone number is 248-794-0067, and that's a Hands on Healing Detroit's phone number.
So thank you so much, Elle. If you all want to support Elle's work, make sure you get in contact with her to support the amazing work she is doing on behalf of crime survivors, safety, and justice, but also, most importantly, for starting an amazing organization, Hands on Healing Detroit. Elle, thank you so much. It's been a wonderful conversation to get to know you a little bit more, but also for you to inspire others in this work. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Crime Survivor Speak podcast. If you haven't already, you can become a member of the Crime Survivor Safety and Justice Detroit chapter that's led by Elle. You can go to our website at www.cssj.org, or you can join a chapter near you or our national network. Remember, you can tune into all podcast episodes on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other streaming platforms as well. We are always healing through action. And as we end each of these episodes, Elle, I want to test you with this saying: when survivors speak,
change happens.
There you go. When survivors speak, change happens, and change is happening. Thank you all so much for joining today's episode. We'll talk to you soon. I'm looking forward to more of these conversations with amazing survivor leaders across the country. Thank you. Talk to you later.